Welcome everyone to the Tableau Server Administration and Utilization Training. This session is comprised of two 30-minute sections, Tableau Server Administration and Server Utilization. We will begin with Administration, which covers server configuration and some deployment features of Tableau Server, such as APIs and command line utilities. At 30 minutes past the hour, we will begin the other half of our training, Tableau Server Utilization. That session will cover the capabilities of the Tableau Server user interface and will include best practices on organizing content and users in your Tableau server. Feel free to attend either the full hour or either half. A couple notes before I get started. This training addresses many of the new features added to Tableau Server in 2018.2. when we launched our Tableau Services Manager to assist in the administration of Tableau Server. For those of you working with versions of Server prior to 2018.2, I'll call out any areas where the functionality of earlier versions differs significantly. To ask questions, use the Q&A option. Please keep questions relevant to this training. If you have a more detailed question regarding a specific deployment scenario, please contact your account representative who can assist you or put you in touch with a technical resource. That'll also help Tableau better understand your specific server environment before making any recommendations. Finally, our customers love our free training, and we are passionate about empowering people to be successful with our platform. At the end of this training, please provide feedback regarding the content delivered. Your feedback helps us tailor this training to your needs. As many of you likely know, Tableau Server is the sharing and collaboration portion of the Tableau platform, and it can be hosted by your team on-premise or in the cloud. It allows the members of your organization that create reports in Tableau Desktop to share their insights with other users via an in-browser experience. Users on the server can also be empowered to draw further insights from published reports and data, all within the guidelines of a permissioning model managed by your organization. In the first half of our training, we're going to cover Tableau Server Administration. Over the next half hour, we'll talk about configuring a Tableau server and understanding how and when to use the Tableau Server APIs and command line utilities. We'll also discuss where to find useful documentation for more advanced configuration options. Tableau Server is a black box install, so all of the processes needed for the server to run are included in the initial install package. We will cover each of these processes later in the presentation. Tableau Server is flexible. It can be scaled up or out, and several components can be changed after initial installation. The Tableau Server Administrator Guide, available on our website, is the best resource to get more detailed documentation on components or to find answers to questions that may not be covered in this training. The minimum hardware requirements and recommendations for Tableau Server are also available on our website. On the technical specifications page. While you can test Tableau Server on a machine with as few as 2 cores, a good enterprise default for Tableau Server is an 8-core machine with 32 gigabytes of RAM and a couple hundred gigabytes of disk space. If you are running a distributed environment for Tableau Server, Tableau recommends a minimum of 8 cores per machine. This is especially important if configuring Tableau Server for high availability. It's also important to note that if your organization is interested in deploying a highly available Tableau server, you'll need to start off with a minimum of 3 nodes. The latest versions of Tableau Server are available for download on our site. During the download process, you'll be instructed to enter in your product key to license the server. The next couple of slides contain some very high-level points about installing Tableau Server that we'll reference for the rest of this half hour. If If you haven't installed Server yet, I recommend watching the Installing and Configuring Tableau Server on-demand training for a more holistic overview of the process. One of the most important choices that you'll make during installation is your user identity store. For provisioning users, Tableau can be configured with either a local or an external identity store. Local authentication is Tableau Server's built-in authentication system, and it lets you create individual usernames and passwords for your users that are managed on Tableau Server. For those who opt for an external identity store, note that Tableau Server is optimized to interface with Active Directory, and you can take advantage of certain options like enabling automatic logins for your users based off of their Active Directory identity. For all other external identity stores, Tableau supports LDAP as a generic way to communicate the identity store. For those of you looking to set up a single sign-on experience for your server users, Tableau supports a number of SSO options for both local and external identity stores. We'll discuss those further in a little bit. Also, please note that once chosen, the authentication model cannot be changed on Tableau Server. That is, the user identity store being either local or external. To do so, you would have to completely uninstall and reinstall the server. Another important item to know before installing Tableau Server is that Tableau Services Manager, or TSM, and the Tableau Server Gateway each require an available TCP port in order for you to access them. TSM defaults to port 8850, and the Tableau Server Gateway service defaults to port 80. If you enable external SSL for your Tableau server, the gateway will use port 443. One additional note on those ports, we do strongly recommend that you ensure that both port 8850 and 80 are not in use on your system before installing Tableau Server. More information on the ports and the general installation process can be found on the Tableau Server admin guide that I showed you earlier under the Before You Install page. For now, let's go ahead and hop into kind of the post-installation part of this, Tableau Services Manager. Once you've finished the installation process, you'll need to open the Tableau Services Manager, which you can find by navigating to this URL, substituting in the name of your server for the server name portion. Note that unlike Tab Admin, the command line tool frequently used to administer server in pre-2018.2 versions, TSM can be accessed remotely, that is, on machines other than the one on which server was installed. For those of you working on pre-2018.2 versions of Tableau Server, many of the configuration options we'll address with TSM are available to you in the configuration wizard during and after your server install. Let's go ahead and take a look at a sample Tableau Services Manager. When you log into TSM using a local admin account on the computer on which server was installed, the first thing that you'll see is a list of the server processes and their statuses. You can find this information in other locations as well, such as the command line tool or on the status tab of the Manage All Sites location on Tableau Server, which we'll see later. For now, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the processes listed here and their individual roles in making Tableau Server function. Before we dive into the processes, let's get through some terminology that I'm going to be using. A process is an instance of a computer program that is being executed. In the case of Tableau Server, processes that run the server include things like the VizQL server, data engine, and others. A single process may run multiple threads in order to perform instructions in parallel. Some processes on Tableau Server, like the VizQL server, are multi-threaded. Others, like the backgrounder, are not. A server, in this case, is going to be a program running to serve the requests of other programs. It can also be used to refer to a physical computer dedicated to running one or more services. As we said at the beginning of this training, Tableau Server is a black box install. So all of the processes needed for the server to run are included in the initial install package. The first thing to understand is that Tableau Server is querying your data. This can be relational data sources, cubes, cloud-based data, or flat files like Excel. On the other side of the server are the clients who are authenticated and have access to Tableau Server. This can be a modern browser, or iOS or Android app, Tableau desktop, or a command line tool. During installation, you will see a component called the base install on every node that you add to your Tableau Server environment. This is not configurable. It will be added to your initial node and all additional nodes if you're distributing your environment. The base install includes two processes, the coordination service and the cluster controller. Together, these components monitor your other server processes and detect failures. In a highly available configuration, they'll ensure a quorum and, if needed, initiate failover. The gateway receives client requests to the server and directs them to the appropriate service for action. Typically, it will route those requests in a round-robin fashion to the first available process. Our next two processes here are the application server and the repository. The application server handles a lot of different tasks for Tableau, like authentication, authorization, rendering of the web UI, so everything that you see on server outside of the actual visualization, requests from the REST API to server, and it's involved in the publishing process from Tableau desktop. The repository is a PostgreSQL database with metadata encompassing users, group assignments, permissions, projects, etc. It also stores flat files that are published up to the server. In a distributed environment, you can have up to 2 copies of the repository, an active one and a passive one. If the active repository goes down, server will automatically fail over to the passive instance. The search and browse process contains an index of all of the content on Tableau Server and its metadata. It uses that information to help users find what they're looking for, whether during a general browse through the site or specific searches using the search tool. The next thing I want to point out is the data source drivers section of server. For all data sources that you connect to live or plan to refresh extracts of on Tableau Server, the drivers for those databases need to be installed on the machine that server is installed on, as well as all nodes that server is installed on in a distributed environment. Next up, we have VizQL server and the cache server. VizQL is the underlying technology for Tableau's visual magic. It's what queries the data source and renders the visualizations based off of user interaction with the data. The cache server helps the VizQL server and many other processes on your server run in a more performant manner because it holds frequently used data in a cache that can reduce the number of queries that need to be executed. Next up, we have the data engine and the file store. Anyone working on a 10.5 or later version of Tableau Server is working with our Hyper data engine, which creates and queries Tableau extracts, which are snapshots of your data at a point in time that can be refreshed on a schedule. Hyper takes the function of the data engine and delivers faster than ever extracts for Tableau in a post 10.5 environment. The file store is responsible for making sure that all of those extracts that you've created are reliably stored on every node in your server environment. Next up, we've got the backgrounder, which, as you might guess, runs all of the background tasks on your server, including things like refreshing data extracts or sending out subscriptions to Tableau dashboards. From a performance perspective, running very large or frequent extract refreshes is very CPU intensive. It's a best practice to run those refreshes at off-peak business hours. If your organization heavily uses Tableau data extracts, we might recommend setting up a distributed environment and isolating those backgrounders onto a machine dedicated entirely to that process. Our final process here is Tableau Data Server. And Data Server is a proxy for all of the queries to any of your published Tableau data sources. Data Server allows for centralized storage of your data sources for all of your users, meaning that you can have a single source of the truth for your organization and allow multiple workbooks to utilize the same data source. The data server also lets data curators in your organization share things like advanced calculations, hierarchies, and aliased fields with other members of your team. Now that we understand the processes that make up Tableau Server, let's hop back into Tableau Services Manager in the browser and take a look at the next two tabs, Maintenance and Configuration. From the TSM Maintenance tab, you can generate and analyze Tableau Server log files, and you can upload log files to any open technical support case that you have with the Tableau support team. Log files can also be zipped and saved locally using the command line. On the Configuration tab, you can find a number of ways to configure your Tableau Server instance to meet your organization's need. For those of you on a pre-2018.2 version, many of these options are available in the Configuration Wizard. This first tab here, Topology, will allow me to change the number of processes running on a given node. And you can change this dynamically without needing to restart the server. So for instance, I could add more backgrounders at night to support a higher extract refresh load. This is also where you'll get the bootstrap file that you use to create links between nodes in your cluster when you're installing a distributed environment. Remember that for high availability in Tableau Server, we recommend that you need a minimum of 3 nodes. If you're interested in configuring a highly available Tableau Server, I'd suggest taking a look at the resources on our site and reaching out to your Tableau account team. Next up, we have Security, and the first tab in Security is the Run as Service account. If Tableau Server needs to access other servers, file shares, or databases that use Windows authentication, then the account listed here is going to be used for server to access those resources. So that could be for things like scheduling automated data extract refreshes from the database, allowing end users to maintain a live connection to the database without being prompted for user credentials. You could also use it in certain use cases to set up SQL Server impersonation or Kerberos support for delegated access to relevant databases. By default, Server is going to select this network service account to fill the role. This default account won't have permission to connect to other computers in your network. So if it doesn't fit your server's needs, this is where you would go to update that account. The account can be updated or changed at any point during the server's lifetime without needing to uninstall the server. This external SSL tab is where you can encrypt communication between Tableau Server and any clients accessing it. The repository SSL tab is where you would go to encrypt communication between the PostgreSQL repository and other server components. Over here under User Identity and Access, we have our identity store listed out. Remember that you select one during installation and that you would have to uninstall and reinstall Tableau Server in order to change it. This authentication method tab is where you would go to set up a single sign-on experience or to point your authentication towards an external IDP. You've got options like username and password, Kerberos, SAML, setting up mutual SSL, or OpenID Connect. You can also use trusted authentication with either local or external identity stores. Trusted authentication basically tells Tableau server to trust the authentication performed by another web server. So this is great, for instance, in embedding use cases when you want to have your customers log into a customer portal and have that authentication automatically translate to logging into their Tableau server account. Under notifications is where you would go to enter in the information for your SMTP server, including the port, username and password, and an email address from which to send notification emails. You need to provide this information in order to enable any of the events listed on this tab, doing things like sending emails for extract refresh failures or allowing users to subscribe to dashboards. You can also set emails for server health monitoring, as well as drive space warnings. This final tab down here, licensing, is where you would go to access your Tableau server license key. You can view and manage Tableau server licenses, review expiration dates, and activate or deactivate product keys. You can also access your Tableau server product keys in your customer portal. Let's hop back into PowerPoint here for a couple of more notes on administration. First, we'll talk about caching. In order to configure your server level caching, you can use the command line tool, or in pre-2018.2 servers, the configuration wizard. And you'll see 3 caching options: refresh less often, which holds onto your cache for a longer period of time; balanced, which lets you specify the amount of time that you want server to hold onto the cache; and refresh more often, which will reduce the amount of time that server holds on to any cached data. To read about caching specifics, please visit Tableau's knowledge base online. While we can give you general performance guidelines, a good rule of thumb is that it's always best to test a configuration and determine what best fits your needs. Next up, let's talk about Tableau's command line utilities, and specifically how you can automate them to make administering your server a little bit easier. So you can gain a lot of efficiency by automating tab admin, or the TSM command line, as well as tab command. Tab admin and the TSM command line would both be used typically to administer the server and do server level tasks. Tab command is great for doing things like adding users, projects, sites. A basic automation workflow that you would follow is to write the scripts or batch files for various server tasks and trigger those scripts using a Windows task scheduler. I definitely recommend checking out the admin guides on our website or the Tableau server forums for examples and full ranges of possibility. Next up, let's run through the Tableau server APIs real quick. 2 APIs that are very helpful for automation tasks are the REST API and the Document API. The REST API can help you automate tasks like managing users, groups, and sites, or updating workbooks and data sources. And while it shares a lot of functionality with tab command, it gives you greater ability to trigger those tasks based off of certain listening tools and interactions. The Document API is helpful for creating and deploying templates or migrating your workbooks from test to production data sources. For data connectivity, there are 2 great APIs that you can work with: the Data Extract API or the Web Data Connector. The Data Extract API will be helpful for connecting to data sources not currently supported by Tableau and pulling them down into Tableau extracts. The Web Data Connector allows you to create custom connections to data on the web. For those of you interested in embedding your Tableau dashboards, 2 great APIs to read up on are the JavaScript API and the REST API. The JavaScript API will allow the web page that you have embedded Tableau server in to have greater interaction with the Tableau dashboards themselves. And the REST API is going to refine the experience by, for instance, querying server metadata so that when your user logs in, they see the correct information displayed. And finally, for those of you working on 2018.2 or later, we have the extensions API. It's in some ways the reverse of the JavaScript API. Instead of creating interactions between your Tableau dashboard and some outside third-party application it's embedded in, you can place third-party applications directly within a Tableau dashboard and create interactions there. This concludes the server administration portion of our training. So we're going to give the panelists a couple of minutes to catch up on questions now, and we'll reconvene in a few minutes to talk about server utilization. All right. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the second half of our server training today, Tableau server utilization. This training will focus on the capabilities of the Tableau server user interface and will include tips on organizing content and users in Tableau server. So those of you who were here for the first half of the training might be thinking to yourself right about now, great, I've installed and configured my Tableau server, but what do I do now? How do I get my users and my content in server? And how do I organize those users and content? Great question. And that's what we want to focus on in that second half. The first thing that I want to do is just get ourselves oriented in Tableau server. Server can be composed of multiple sites, which are used to completely partition the server into separate secure areas. So that dotted line between the sites there lets us know that all of the content from site 1, all of the groups information there, the data sources and workbooks is completely separate from site 2. Sites might be employed in use cases where you, for instance, have multiple external environment clients, and client A needs to not even know that client B exists on the server. You might also use it for internal departments if, for instance, HR wants their data to exist in a fully multi-tenant environment separate from, say, the sales organization. Within sites, you can have multiple projects. A project is a collection of several workbooks and data sources. Administrators can restrict project access to groups and individual users. When you first log into your Tableau server, you'll notice that you have a couple of different defaults. The first is the default site. You can't delete that, but you can rename it. As you start to add multiple sites into your Tableau server, you'll notice that those sites exist in a dropdown, and that in order to administer the server from the server level, you'll want to click on that dropdown and go to the top where you'll see Manage All Sites. And I'll show you that in a little bit. On each individual site, you'll also have a default project. You can't delete those as well, and I would in fact recommend holding on to them as a good administrative tool because they'll serve as a template for all future projects that you add to your site. And so, for instance, the permissions that you place on that default project will be copied over to any projects you make after that act. And you can use that as a powerful tool to ensure that no one has access to projects until they are specifically given permission to see that information. One final piece I'll talk about while we're orienting ourselves are the different levels of roles that you can think about in terms of how you might want to manage your server. In this model, server administrators are IT professionals who maintain and deploy server solutions. Essential areas for server administrators may include networking, hardware tuning and maintenance, security access, and managing users and directory services. A site administrator, on the other hand, is fundamentally concerned with the structure of any given site on Tableau server, including creating projects, adding users, organizing users into groups, and giving groups permission to access certain projects. Project leaders are effectively the content administrators for any given project, so it's important that they understand how permissions work in Tableau, along with Tableau content management best practices. As you're setting your server up, you're probably going to want to add users. There are a couple of different ways that you can do this. If you're leveraging Active Directory and you've set up your Tableau server with an external identity store, you can sync directly to your Active Directory to take advantage of things like your users or the groups that you've set up. If you're using local authentication, you can add users individually, which might be useful in one-off cases or, say, for a test environment. You can import a CSV of users and their information, or you can use tab command or the REST API to automate that process. Adding users can be done from both the server or the site level. I have a note here about considering site roles because that'll be important for the capabilities of a user on any given site. We'll talk about the permissioning model in a little bit, but it's good to know that you can give a user a site role like creator that contains a lot of capabilities in Tableau and permission them down, but you cannot permission a user up, that is, give them more capabilities than is allowed by their site role. And a user can have different site roles on different sites within your Tableau server. Once you've added your users, you're probably going to want to organize them into groups. This is done only at the site level, and you can leverage your Active Directory groups if that makes sense for your server organization. The best thing about groups is that they make permissioning easier to manage. Instead of knowing that Ashley and Adam both need to have access to a content project, and then when Ashley moves teams, I have to remember to find that project and specifically take her off, I can organize them into groups like content developers and content viewers and permission those groups on projects. Real quick, I'm going to show you guys how you would add permissions on a project level. This is a Tableau server site that I'm looking at here, and these are all different projects I could access. To change the permissions at a project level, I'm going to click on these three dots. I'll come down here to permissions. I can add permissions for users or groups using this blue link down here. You'll also probably remember that I said you can use this default project to set permissions that make sure no one on Tableau server will see content until specifically permissioned to see it. That's where you would come here and set the permissions for all users to be none on the project, workbook, and data source level. You can also set permissions on individual content pieces within your projects, but remember that just like permissioning groups instead of users, permissioning projects instead of individual workbooks or views will keep your permission structure easier to manage in the long run. This is also a high-level overview of how Tableau Server thinks about and reads your permission structure. Deny will always trump allow. User permissions will trump group permissions. And if at the end of this flow, no one has specifically been given access or specifically been denied access, they will end up being denied, which is why that all users, none permission structure will result in inherent denial for anyone who isn't specifically given access. For those of you who are server admins, you'll also notice two tabs called Schedules and Tasks. Server admins can create, change, and reassign schedules, which are going to be used to run your tasks, like extract refreshes or subscriptions. And so this gives you a lot of control over the time of day that your content creators are going to be scheduling extract refreshes to run on your server, for example. And that can make sure that you can better manage the load on your server at any given moment. Schedules have the following options: priority, which determines the order in which tasks that are scheduled to run at the same time will be handled. Execution mode, which will indicate whether to run tasks in parallel or serially. And frequency, things like hourly, daily, weekly, or monthly. The final two tabs I'll point out here are the status and settings tabs. On a server level, status will let you see a process list and the status for all of those processes, just like we saw when we signed into the Tableau Services Manager. On both the server and site level, you can access certain default administrative views of Tableau Server that will tell you things like how your extract refresh schedules are running. Are they on time? Are they completing well? Are certain refreshes failing? It can also help you see things like the most popular workbooks or data sources on your Tableau server, which data hasn't really been touched in a while and maybe should be retired, as well as actions by certain users. You also have settings options on both the server and the site level, and the settings that you have for a given site are different from those that you would have on the overall server level. I won't go through all of them right now, but I would definitely recommend after this presentation taking some time to familiarize yourself with the options in your settings pages. On both levels, you'll also have different abilities to manage the extensions that are available via that extensions API we covered in server administration. All right, so now that we have all of that background, let's go ahead and hop into Tableau Server and actually see what you and your end users would be able to see and do once you've got your server set up. So once again, this is my Tableau Server interface. As an end user and not an administrator, I would see just this content tab here, and I would see the projects, workbooks, views, and data sources that I've been given permission to access. As administrators, you'll see things like users and groups, schedules and tasks, and then status and settings. You'll click on this drop-down here to navigate between sites that you have access to. If you're a server admin, you'll have access to all sites. And also to go to this Manage All Sites option at the top, which is where you'll administer from the server level. Let's go ahead and hop into a visualization on Tableau Server. So I'll open up this workbook. As this viz is loading, I'll point out that things like row level security or user filters could come into play here, in which case you could change the data that lies underneath a single visualization based off of which Tableau server user is accessing that viz. As you'll see as I click around here, all of the interactivity developed in the desktop product is faithfully recreated in the browser so that you can have a zero footprint user experience. You also have the ability up here to toggle on and off favorites for given workbooks or views, and this is a helpful tool for your users to navigate the server. As your server holds more views, they can be difficult to find, so adding frequently accessed workbooks to a user's favorites makes those views a few clicks away from this menu up here in the top right. While interacting with Tableau visuals, you have the ability to undo and redo, which do pretty much what you'd think, as well as revert, which will return the visualization to its state at the time of initial load. This refresh button here will override any caching going on in the dashboard and force Tableau to look for the current data underneath the dashboard. If a user needs to apply multiple filters on a dashboard, this feature will have Tableau wait until all selections are made before querying the database. This can be a useful tool to improve performance because ultimately Tableau will issue fewer queries. You may also notice here that I'm using a view specific to myself as a user logged in. Custom views are a great way for people to leverage the filters that they always apply to Tableau dashboards and save themselves a couple of clicks. I have the ability to make my view my default, share it with other members of my team, and access the original view at any point in time. Over here, I also have two capabilities that bring Tableau server into my email so that if I want to track certain elements on a Tableau dashboard, I can be notified by Tableau as changes occur. To access a data-driven alert, you select a numeric axis in your view and click this alert button. You can set a certain threshold at which you want server to send you an email letting you know that you've surpassed a given target or quota that you were aiming for. You can also subscribe yourself or as an admin subscribe others to receive a snapshot of this view at a given time of day, time of week, once a month, so that they'll be able to monitor the progress that lies underneath the data for a dashboard. Over here, we have share links and embed codes for sharing Tableau server dashboards with other users of the server or embedding a Tableau server dashboard in your web interface. I have the ability to download things like an image of the dashboard, the data behind the dashboard, a Tableau workbook, as well as other options, all of which are fully permissionable. Here I can access the comments, which are part of the collaborative design of Tableau server. Users can exchange feedback on a view right here. You can permission users to see or participate in comments. You can tag other members of your team so that they'll be notified they've been mentioned in the comments. And as you see here, you can attach screenshots of what the view looked like as you were interacting with it so that a user can load those filters and understand your comment in its full context. The final capability that I'll point out here is the ability to web edit. This is Tableau Desktop Lite in the browser itself, although we're always moving towards parity with desktop from web editing. Web editing is a great tool to enable your end users, the consumers of your reports that are creators or explorers in your Tableau server site, to ask the additional question of the data, or to further customize a view. Say, I'm looking at quantity by state, and I, as an end user, would prefer to see how our profit maps out. Web editing will give me that capability. Depending on my permissions, I can save my changes to the workbook, or I can save a copy so that I could access my new report at any point in time. Should I accidentally save over the original report as I'm making my changes, I can access the revision history behind any given workbook from the thumbnail view. And I can view or restore old revisions as needed. And with that, we're going to wrap up our live training today. Thank you for attending this training on server administration and utilization. I'll reiterate again that the Tableau Server Administrator Guide is a great resource to find answers to all of your questions relating to Tableau Server. And if you can't find the answer there, Tableau has a very active user community that responds to requests for information fairly quickly. If you have specific questions about setting up your server environment, you can direct them to your account team at Tableau. Tableau consultants can advise on configuration options covered today, as well as answer questions on topics like trusted ticketing or leveraging a proxy server with your Tableau server. After you configure your Tableau server, please also read the performance section in the administration guide. If you have any specific performance questions, you can direct those to Tableau server's technical support. You may also need to submit a performance recording and log files with that request. Thank you to everyone for attending today's training. I'd like to request again that you please take some time to submit feedback. Customer feedback drives the improvement process of Tableau's live trainings. Now the panelists and I are going to answer the remaining questions in the queue, and in a few minutes we'll end the seminar. Thank you very much.